Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and unpack the deeply layered mechanics and the really profound philosophies hidden within the field of Earth from the Dreamweaver lore. Now, if you've been following the complex, meticulously crafted world building of this universe, you already know that nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, is ever just a simple magic spell or some basic geographical location on a map. Everything here operates on multiple levels simultaneously. We're talking about a perfect blend of hard science, raw elemental forces, and these incredibly deep philosophical truths about society and human nature. It's what makes this lore so captivating, right? Today, we are going to completely decode episode 316. We're looking closely at the rupturing of the knowledgeable House of the White Liger and the epic unsealing of the first barrier, Terra, or Earth. As we go through this, we're going to see exactly how the literal, physical laws of this dimension perfectly mirror the emotional and societal laws that govern its people. It's just a brilliant piece of storytelling. So by breaking this down piece by piece, we are going to see exactly how all these intricate conceptual gears fit together. To make sense of all this dense world building, here is our roadmap for today. We'll be covering the gate of Earth, the geological simulation, the powers to bind and loose, and finally, Earth's elemental atmospheres. Let's get right into it. Section 1, the gate of Earth and the initial encounter. We kick things off with Mitsuki, Arlene, and Helios standing right before the gate of Earth. Now, just to give you a quick refresher on the exact context here, our protagonists are currently navigating this highly complex, fascinating pocket dimension known as Mitsuki's internal titanium chronochrome. They've already successfully unsealed the limiters in the previous halls, and the energy is visibly flowing out of the Hall of Earth and straight into its associated pool. This is a huge deal because it tells us the system is primed, it's alive, it's reacting to their presence. But before they can fully tap into the field of Earth and release its energy, they hit a roadblock. They're presented with a puzzle. Right in front of this gate sits an agate tablet, and it's engraved with a very specific, incredibly cryptic phrase. It reads, "The power to bind and to loose." And I want you to pay close attention to that, because this phrase essentially sets up the central mystery of our entire explainer today. This is the strict, non-negotiable condition required to unlock the field of Earth's energy. In many ways, you have to look at this not just as a password or some magical key. It is the fundamental thesis statement for how the Earth operates in this entire lore. To truly understand this dimension, you have to understand what it actually means to bind things together and conversely, what it means to loose them or break them apart. So as we follow Mitsuki, Arlene, and Helios into the hall, I want you to keep this phrase right in the back of your mind. Because every single physical process they are about to witness is going to serve as a direct, literal explanation for this exact condition. Section 2. The geological simulation and the mechanics of the orb. Stepping into the hall, our protagonists are greeted by this absolute spectacle. They find a massive, rotating orb. I mean, this thing is roughly half the size of the immense dimension itself. And instantly, things get very literal and very scientifically grounded. The orb is tilted on its axis, and it's rotating at a steady, constant rate. At first glance, Mitsuki kind of laughingly dismisses it as just a huge orb spinning around in space, but Arlene, being incredibly perceptive, quickly realizes that this is actually a hyper-detailed simulation of Earth's geological processes. Arlene points out that Christopher detects a faint amount of electromagnetic radiation hanging in the air. This prompts Mitsuki to instantly and smartly generate a gravitational bubble around the three of them for protection. Once Mitsuki actually lays her hands on another agate tablet inside the hall, the inner workings of this massive, highly pressurized mechanical system are finally fully revealed to them. So let's walk through exactly how this builds a perfectly functioning planetary cycle, starting from the molten iron core, generating electromagnetic radiation all the way up to the topsoil on the surface. Here is exactly what the data reveals. At the very center of this massive orb is a molten core made of liquid iron. As this core rotates rapidly, it starts sending out powerful, intense waves of electromagnetic radiation. These waves then bond to the magnetic elements within the surrounding magma, literally pulling that magma in the direction of the spinning core. Now, this is where the physics gets super intense and honestly, really cool. This electromagnetism causes the ionization of the elements. That drastically heats everything up and raises the pressure inside the orb to extreme, almost unfathomable levels. And this immense pressure does something very specific and very important. It forces the most precious elements to crystallize deep within the orb. Meanwhile, the less precious elements, the ones that can't handle or don't benefit from that intense pressure, are pushed out through the crevices. They rise above that crystallized inner sphere, and as they rise, they start to cool down. They solidify and settle into various layers, with the absolute least precious elements forming the very surface. basically the crust or the topsoil of the orb. But amazingly, it doesn't even stop there. The electromagnetic energy radiating from the core also generates a literal force field around the entire orb. This force field captures the gases that are bursting up from the highly pressurized interior, and that is what forms an atmosphere. Over time, those less precious elements sitting up there on the surface, they eventually sink back down into the depths. They return to the core to be refined, to be nourished with those precious elements, before inevitably rising once again. It is this perpetual, beautifully engineered and flawless cycle of rising, falling, renewing, and rising again. Now, here is where things take a fascinating turn. What's really interesting here is the sudden, jarring shift from the literal hard science we just talked about to the deeply metaphorical. Arlene suddenly opens her eyes in this moment of pure realization, and Mitsuki immediately connects the dots right alongside her. The source material makes it crystal clear at this point. This isn't just a basic science lesson about rocks, ionization, and gravity. No, the Dreamweaver lore is actually using this highly detailed geological simulation as a mirror. It's a direct reflection of human relationships, complex societal structures, and profound emotional truths. The revelation here is that the physical laws governing the planet are exactly one-to-one identical to the emotional laws governing its inhabitants. Section 3. The power to bind and the societal core. This realization brings us right back to decoding the first part of that tablet's cryptic condition, the power to bind. We've just seen, physically, how electromagnetism binds the magnetic elements in the magma tightly to the spinning core. But what does that actually mean on a metaphysical level? How in the world does a planet's physical gravity translate to a civilization's spiritual gravity? Well, the absolutely crucial point here is that the Earth's physical core represents its heart. When Mitsuki analyzes the data from the simulation, she realizes that the electromagnetic energy radiated by the core is a direct, undeniable metaphor for the love and affection of the Earth. Let that sink in. This is what the power to bind truly means. It is this warm, emotional, and spiritual electromagnetism that binds the elements, which, in this metaphor, are the actual people, the families, the communities. It binds them together and causes them to move in harmony, perfectly in tune with the heart of the Earth. It's such a profound concept when you think about it. Gravity and magnetism aren't just cold, unfeeling physics in this universe. In this lore, they are the literal, tangible manifestations of familial love and societal cohesion. It's the invisible force holding a world together. And this brilliantly illustrates the dynamic of pretty much any community, which Arlene so accurately compares to a normal, everyday family. Just like that bubbling magma inside the orb, any family or society is going to experience conflict. It's inevitable. And in our geological model, what does conflict create? It creates heat and it creates pressure. This pressure acts directly on the members of the society. Now, this pressure yields two very distinct outcomes for the people involved. For those who are already deeply in tune with the heart of the Earth, this pressure doesn't break them. It actually refines them. It crystallizes them. It makes them stronger, much more precious, and keeps them held closely to the core. On the other hand, the members who are not in tune with the heart, they react very differently to that same exact pressure. They flee, or they break loose. They are pushed away, cast out to the surface, acting just like that less precious topsoil we talked about earlier. But here is the true beauty of the Earth's cycle. This isn't some kind of permanent, unforgiving exile. Over time, as the lore tells us, those members who break loose and flee to the cold surface will eventually sink back down into the warmth of the Earth. They return to be purified, refined, and nourished all over again. The cycle of familial discord, the resulting distance, and the eventual beautiful reconciliation perfectly mirrors the planet's geological recycling of elements. Section 4. The power to loose, focusing on boundaries and laws. So now we have to expand this metaphor outward. We're moving from the scale of families and communities to the massive scale of civilizations. We're shifting our focus to the second half of the tablet's condition, the power to lose. If the power to bind is all about love, crystallization, and holding elements close to the heart, what happens when things simply cannot be reconciled? What happens when a rogue element poses a literal threat to the core itself? This is exactly where the lore shifts from family dynamics to the high-stakes, macro-level geopolitics of nations and empires. To understand this, let's clearly define what a terrain actually is in this lore, because it's absolutely vital to understanding this specific power. The word terrain, which is derived from terra, is defined by Mitsuki as a domain or a boundary within which certain specific laws apply. The ability of the Earth to bind is fundamentally connected to the act of building and planting civilizations. And here is the major key takeaway for this section. These civilizations are sustained by laws whose absolute baseline revolves around a profound, unwavering respect for boundaries. It is this strict respect for boundaries that allows peaceful nations to coexist side by side with their neighbors. Because think about it, without boundaries, there is no terrain. There is only chaos.
So what happens when a civilization decides to ignore those boundaries? When it acts in ways that completely compromise the territorial sovereignty and the security of other sovereign states? Well, it inevitably drags itself, and everyone around it, into war. And this exact transgression is what triggers the Earth to exercise the power to loose. In the specific context, to loose doesn't just mean to let go, it means the forceful act of uprooting and overthrowing. It is the necessary, sometimes violent destruction of ideas, ideals, or even entire civilizations that have found themselves fundamentally out of harmony with the Earth's heart. Mitsuki makes a really brilliant connection here to other well-established parts of the lore. She parallels this destructive yet ultimately purifying power to Sun, a figure whose very name translates to the destroyer of lies. She also compares it to the core ideals of the Nightbane House, which exists purely as the bane, the enemy, or the scourge of darkness. So you see, the power to loose isn't evil, it isn't malicious. It is basically the Earth's immune system kicking in. It is the resolute, forceful uprooting of toxicity in order to preserve the health and the integrity of the overall terrain.
Section 5. Earth's Elemental Atmospheres. Finally, we have to look up. We have to look at what hovers directly above this terrain. We've discussed the molten core, the shifting magma, the crystallized crust, and the rigid laws of the land, but Arlene points out the absolute last, equally important piece of this massive puzzle, the atmosphere of the Earth. Remember from the geological simulation we broke down earlier? This atmosphere is generated in part and totally sustained by the electromagnetic activity of the core and the mantle. Therefore, the atmosphere isn't just random chaotic weather happening for no reason, it is deeply, inextricably tied to the emotional state of the core itself. Every terrain has a climate, right? Which is essentially its average observable atmosphere over a period of time. And Arlene beautifully breaks down exactly what these elemental atmospheres represent in the context of the lore. Let's go through them, because this is fascinating. Wind represents a liberating atmosphere, the feeling of being unburdened and free. Rain is deeply empathetic. Think about it. It fosters new growth while simultaneously washing and cleansing the earth. The heat of the sun provides a powerfully fortifying atmosphere, bringing strength and endurance. The Earth itself provides a hopeful atmosphere simply through its sheer, undeniable ability to sustain life against all odds. The steady, reliable cycle of the seasons represents the element of time, which naturally facilitates maturity and growth. Lightning, which is sudden and explosive, represents the volatile cycles of progress. It has this raw ability to coordinate and literally animate constructs. And finally, the element of light. Light enables vision, bringing total, absolute clarity to the domain. So you see, in this lore, these aren't just passing weather patterns. They are literal physical expressions and atmospheric projections of the Earth's emotions. Or perhaps more accurately, they are the collective emotions of the people and the domains living within the Earth. The predominant expressions of these specific atmospheres are what ultimately determine the overall climate of an entire civilization. Ultimately, breaking down this explainer leaves us pondering our own personal terrain. The source material actually concludes this massive, deep realization by stating something incredibly profound. It says that when viewed in terms of virtues, these elemental atmospheres naturally foster peace. But when they are viewed in light of vices, they inherently encourage conflict. By the time Mitsuki loops the energy generation process of this hall, preparing to move our protagonist onto the next 4, we as the audience are left staring into a powerful philosophical mirror. Knowing that the overarching climate of any space is entirely dictated by the electromagnetic heart at its core, we have to stop and ask ourselves a serious question. In our own daily lives, do our domain's virtues foster peace, or do our vices secretly brew a climate of conflict? Are we acting like that core, binding the people around us with love and affection, or are we forcing a toxic pressure that will ultimately require the painful power to loose? It's just a masterful, thought-provoking blend of hard geological science and deep human empathy. And honestly, it's exactly what makes decoding the Dreamweaver lore so incredibly rewarding.